corroborating it in a meticulous manner with the text messages. I understand there was an objection, but it was overruled, right? The text messages to show that this conversation that Cohen is testifying to is supported by the documentary evidence. And when they get to Stormy Daniels, they're going to be able to show the checks, the ledgers, all of that stuff. And I think they're doing a really good job to set that up.
I wonder if in this testimony we're seeing an abundance of preparation. You heard what Trump tweeted, which is that this is very well prepared or whatever. Is that a negative necessarily, Charles? If it seems a little too rote, if it seems a little too prepared by, I'm talking obviously about the reaction of a jury in general.
It can be if it seems rehearsed to the point of being inauthentic, and that's the one thing that we can't necessarily judge by the Google Doc, is that we don't know whether it's there's a difference between rehearsed and sort of gotten yourself together and collected and focused versus forced or disingenuous, and I think that that's really what it boils down to. I mean, if Michael Cohen comes across as his regular sort of scatterbrained self, but is also sticking to the script, if you will, and I don't mean that, I mean it purely figuratively, that's fine. If he comes across looking at as a completely different person than anyone has ever seen him before, that I think would draw some curiosity from jurors who may be vaguely familiar with having seen him before. So it's really about showing up in a way where you're still yourself, but you're prepared. And I think that that's the difference. Is it prepared or is it rehearsed? Without seeing it, we can't know. Of course, the Trump camp would love to argue this is rehearsed, this is orchestrated, this is theatric. But if you're the prosecution, all you just want to do is to show that he's prepared. And it seems like he's extremely prepared in terms of how he's sticking to narrowly answering the questions that are asked, not going all over the place that you would, in the ways that you would have come to expect, because that's what the prosecution absolutely needs, not only from keeping the door closed on excess stuff in terms of cross-examination, but also we've been talking a lot about the time. So if I'm the prosecutor on this case, I'm thinking to myself during witness prep, look, we've got a lot of stuff to cover. We cannot have you going all over the place. You need to keep these answers as tight and as brief as possible so that we can get through as much as we can without losing this jury.
And they're moving on here, it looks like. I want to go back to Vaughn Hilliard to get an update. What's happening right now, Vaughn?
Right, she was just, as part of the acknowledgement for Michael Cohen, the terms of the agreement with Karen McDougal were being discussed. And Michael Cohen says that he was informed that Karen McDougal would be given the opportunity to pen 24 articles for the American Media Incorporated publications, as well as appear on 2 magazine covers. And that Michael Cohen was notified through David Pecker and Dylan Howard that that was a part of the arrangement, to which he was elated, knowing that ABC News was not going to be the one to publish the story, that essentially the plan that they had hatched a year prior to catch these types of stories had been a success, and that at that point he said that he in fact did go back to Mr. Trump to inform him about Karen McDougal's story, that the fact that it would not ever get out there, to which Michael Cohen testified in front of this jury that his reaction was, quote, fantastic, great job. They are now moving on to the 3rd catch and kill story. Of course, that is Stormy Daniels, and Michael Cohen is beginning to describe what went into that process to ultimately pay her that $130,000 and also ensure that her story did not become public either.
Thank you so much for that, Vaughn. Keep us posted. I want to welcome to the panel defense attorney Misty Maris. Have you heard anything? There have only been a couple of objections. I think one of them was overruled. One of them was sustained. We're in the kind of quiet part of this. Anything that the defense can use so far?
Well, the defense is really going to focus on exactly what we were speaking about, which is where's the paper trail, right? Because we know that there were encrypted messages. We know that that some of these conversations were happening one-on-one. And these are the critical moments that are going to fill in the gaps for what the prosecution has already presented. So, of course, the defense is going to be pinpointing the credibility of Michael Cohen, which is going to serve as a lot of what the fodder for cross-examination.
And I'm just trying to catch up here on the document as to what's going on right now. It looks like they're continuing with some exhibits between Keith Davidson and Michael Cohen. So they're really focusing in on some of this communication regarding these payments, not just involving Karen McDougal, but ultimately soon to involve Stormy Daniels. There is an email that says, Michael, please call me at your convenience. Thanks, Keith Davidson. And Hoffinger asked, when you received this email, you called Keith Davidson. Cohen, I did. I said, great job. And the boss is very happy. And it is the CEO of the parent company. And he also had just laid out the $30,000 for the doorman, who we discussed. So he's putting pressure on me to speak to Trump and to get the money back. Hoffinger, was he upset about it? Cohen, very. So where do you think this testimony is taking us here, Misty?
Well, this is all so important because this is really going to serve as the basis for what the prosecution needs to prove. Remember, these NDAs on their face, they are not illegal. So we have to get into what the motivation, the reasoning, the intent was behind catching and killing these stories. That coupled with keeping Trump in the loop. And that's the piece that you see them honing in on right now. Okay, so you have these communications with Keith Davidson. Well, did you speak to Trump? What did he say about it? And that's why the conversations between Michael Cohen make Michael Cohen such a critical witness to close the loop on so many of the other issues that the prosecutors have already set the table with other witnesses. But Cohen, he's really the one that can talk about the structure of these transactions and the why. Why were they characterized that way? Why were they structured that way?
We know a lot of notes are being taken by the defense, and maybe that's not a surprise. But in a way, I'm looking at what we have so far and I'm thinking, we know this story. This story has been told by Michael Cohen himself time and time and time again. He's done countless television interviews. He has a podcast. He wrote 2 books about it. It's all in black and white. What are they taking note of, first of all, that they didn't already know? And have you heard anything at all that says, oh, maybe this is going to go in some area that we hadn't expected before?
I haven't heard anything that would surprise me as far as what's going to come out. And to your point, it's so true. The defense knows in general, what he's going to say. The defense has so much out there in the ether to prepare for their cross-examination. But the reason they're taking notes, and I would say my pen would probably be on fire if I were at the defense table myself. The reason is they want to take exactly what he's saying and then attack it with whatever they're going to use on cross-examination specific to the testimony that the jury is hearing. You heard Mr. Cohen say XYZ. Mr. Cohen, you testified to this. What about? And then present whatever evidence they're seeking to use in their cross, whether it be a credibility issue, a document, other witness testimony. No matter what it is, they want to not just generalize. They want to attack the specifics of what comes out in his direct.
And that's a really important point. When you are thinking about cross-examining a witness, when someone tells a lie, they can generally keep the tenor of the overall lie together, the theme of it. Where they get in trouble are the details. And the details are what they're going to focus on when you talk about the small inconsistencies of Michael Cohen's story. Yes, sure. Generally speaking, I can tell consistently a lie about having fixed something for Donald Trump and what I did, and I can write a book about it, and I can keep that together on the stand. But to Misty's point, the jury is hearing very specific testimony, and regardless of whatever's been said previously, this is what counts.
But does an inconsistency have to be an inconsistency? And if he said, yes, I lied, and here's why, does a jury generally understand that? I think there's sometimes there is an inconsistency that maybe a juror can understand, like, okay, he didn't say it exactly the same way, big deal, as opposed to, this is a problem.
Well, that's dependent on how persuasive the arguments are from either side. If I am Donald Trump's attorneys, I'm going to argue this is a big deal. This is an inconsistency that actually matters and you should pay attention to. Not just that, but this other inconsistency over here and this one over here and over there. If I'm the prosecution, I'm going to say, does this change anything about what you've really heard? The fact that someone said, Misty is wearing a purple suit and the color is aubergine. Does that make a difference?
Because we're getting to something that's really good.
Yeah. Cohen is being questioned by Susan Hoffinger about, again, this issue of Trump needing to pay back David Pecker because of the $150,000 deal that David Pecker is now saying that was too much. I want to be personally reimbursed for that, related to Karen McDougal's story. And so Cohen's talking about this with David Pecker. And he says, David expressed to me that his relationship with Trump goes back many, many years. And there's a file drawer, a locked drawer, as he described it, where files that relate to Mr. Trump existed. And at that point in time, David was being considered for the position of CEO at Time Incorporated. And one of the concerns that I had, that I expressed to Mr. Trump, Cohen says, was that if he goes, there's a series of papers there that relate to you. Hoffinger, was Mr. Trump concerned about that? Cohen, yes. Hoffinger, direct attention to September of 2016. Did you record a convo with Trump regarding purchasing Karen McDougal life rights? Cohen, this was the only one I taped.
Why did you tape this one? It was so I could show it to David Pecker, and that way he would hear the conversation that he was going to be paying, him back. And I also wanted him to remain loyal to Donald Trump.
This is key. This is critical. This shows that paper trail. And it also shows, if you think about it, the pattern that Cohen actually experienced when he wasn't getting paid back, or he didn't receive the compensation necessary to pay Stormy Daniels. So I think what the prosecution is kind of doing is laying out this mirror to show this pattern, because the pattern also links back to Trump as well.
Is there an issue, though, if Cohen's right now saying, this was the one conversation I recorded?
And
I think
also,
as a juror...
was Mr. Trump aware? No, ma'am.
And Mr. Trump wasn't aware, but I think, I'm left to question, well, why was this the only one he recorded? Like, how does the prosecution explain that, Charles? And if you're the defense, you've worn both hats. Are you going to pounce on that?
Well, don't assume that this is the only one he's recorded.
Well, he just said it was.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're right.
He said, why did you tape it? He says, this is the only one I taped. And she said, why did you tape this one? And he says, it was so I could show it to David Pecker, and that way he would hear the conversation that he was going to be paying, him back. I also wanted him to remain loyal to Mr. Trump.
Oh, and at this moment, Trump opens his eyes slightly to look up at the monitor where they're showing the recording and the transcript.
I think that if you're the prosecution in this case, you have to kind of sort of get the jury, and I used to say this all the time, the defense, to the extent that they can, would love for you to speculate as much as they can. They want you to sort of think in these other areas that are not on the record. Why? Because that's the area that reasonable doubt exists. If I'm the prosecution, I used to use this line all the time, let's not focus on what ifs. Let's focus on what is. Let's focus on what we actually know. Let's not necessarily ask ourselves questions about why there aren't additional recordings, but we know that there is a recording, so let's deal with the recording that we have and the contents thereof.
So let me ask you about this particular recording. It seems to me there could be a couple of different inferences. One inference could be this sleazy little guy who thought he was being nice to Donald Trump, in fact, is going behind his back. And when he walks in, and they describe it here, he walked in and he hit,
he had the cell phone in his hand. He says he used a voice memo app and hit record.
So this is who this guy is, as opposed to this is a guy who is trying to keep the National Enquirer at bay, keep them loyal to Donald Trump, get this thing fixed by the fixer. Is there a reasonable inference either way?
Yeah, I think it could absolutely go either way, and maybe more context as we continue on the direct examination.
Only need one juror.
Yes, that's exactly it. And I also think, to a point, though, for the prosecutors, what I might focus on is, well, remember, at some point, Michael Cohen is going to have to testify about why they characterize these documents in this way. And